Welcome to Conversations to Inspire, the show that aims to discover the stories behind the person who is the business, the leader, the entrepreneur, to learn more about their path to success, lessons they have discovered along the way, and how they manage their mindset for personal health and business wealth. I'm your host, Kim Adams, and I draw on my background in psychology and organisational performance improvement to explore ideas, actionable strategies, and inspiration for greater self-awareness, psychological well-being, and confidence in business and in life. Today I have Sheridan Stewart with me, and Sheridan is an author of an amazing book that I've just finished writing, and she's also a radio broadcaster known for her insightful, inspiring and relatable style, which really does show through in the book. A popular FM presenter with Triple M, music journalist, comedy producer and speaker, Sheridan has also facilitated personal and professional development workshops for women before joining the Australian Broadcast Corporation, the ABC, here in Australia in 2014. And these days, Sheridan can be heard on ABC Radio Queensland when she's not swimming or writing. And she has been writing a lot in the last couple of years, having written her first book, I Am Enough, a 90-day challenge to find contentment, which was released earlier this year. And she's currently developing a podcast, which will be coming not too distant future. And her mantra is, I have enough, I do enough, I am enough. So welcome, Sheridan. Thank you for being here with me today. Yes, not at all. It's a wonderful opportunity to talk to the author of this book, which, as I said, I have just written. I've just read it. I thought I wish I'd written it. I really do. I would like to write a book, but I haven't quite mastered the habits, and I think your book talks a lot about habits. But I thought I would start by leaping into the middle, and there was a quote there that to me kind of sums up a little bit of your book, but also probably a bit of the human condition these days. And that's a quote by Barbara Benedek. More is not always better. Sometimes it's just more. And I think for so many of us, so many people wanting more, having more, being more, and still not being happy seems to be a bit of the crisis of our current Western culture. Would you agree with that? And is that somewhat the message behind your book? Uh, I can totally relate to that. I find myself so often achieving a goal and then almost like pushing it to the side, like, well, it really wasn't that big of a deal. Even if it had been a big deal to get there, once you actually hit it, it's almost like, well, of course I should have done that, or maybe I should have done it better, or you look for the ways that you didn't do it good enough, rather than being able to actually sit in that moment of going, wow, I just did that. I just achieved that, and celebrating it. Exactly. And something you said there about there's almost this a very strong positive psychology that we've kind of been drawn in to believe that, if we can just think it and believe it, we will manifest our goals. And that's why I think when I first got this book, and I'll be honest, before I even opened it up, I was a little hesitant, because after spending so many years reading so many books, I had gotten a little bit weary of sort of positive psychology on steroids, sort of, I call it, where it's all like, if you just believe yourself to be good enough, then you will be. And the Secret, remember when The Secret came out years ago, and it was all about, manifesting through affirmations, which I love affirmations, but I think a lot of the pop psychology really took that at a very shallow level. And I was a little concerned. I thought, will this be yet another, I'll just have a vision board and say I'm good enough and feel good enough. But it wasn't. And really within the first few pages, I could see that this was actually what I was looking for in terms of the story, your story, but then also talking about, well, what does that actually mean in real life? Like, it's all well and good to sit and meditate about how wonderful life is, but then actually moving into your work, the loss of loved ones, and reality. So how did you shift yourself, I guess, Sheridan, from just wanting to feel better and the affirmations to making those affirmations become actually tangible and real in your life, so that you got the change that you were after?
The same affirmation. It was really confronting looking back, even in my 30s, looking back and seeing year after year of the same affirmation. And I still, so I was curious. I wanted to believe. I am a believer, and I think that makes it. But again, if they're too far from our reality, what they bring up is either a conscious or an unconscious, that's BS. I'm not a millionaire. I don't have, perfect everything. I don't have a perfect body. I don't have a perfect everything. So just saying it doesn't make it so. It might be a dream, it might be a vision, but bringing it a little closer to yourself and allowing for, life to be in the mix as well, it stops us thinking that we are constantly failing in these affirmations. And I wanted to write a book called Affirmations, Why They Don't Work But How They Can. And that idea has been incorporated fairly early in the book, because I wanted to establish right up front that there's a disconnect sometimes between those audacious dreams. They do give us a guidepost or something to aim our arrows at, or send our ducks scurrying in that direction. But if we don't take action, they will be just that, and then they become pipe dreams or failures. And that is debilitating. I think that is the part that has been missing. And I'm, not the only person to have gleaned it. You've gleaned it, Kim. Certainly others who had perhaps a little more training in critical thinking or psychology or psychiatry recognise it. Many of us, and I was like this younger, just want to believe it. We want the result without the effort, and also without self-acceptance of where our limitations are. I think it was Oprah Winfrey that said, we can have it all, we just can't have it all at once. And again, breaking things down and making them doable allows you to create the baby steps that begin to build momentum towards happiness.
Yeah, and I love just thinking of Oprah Winfrey then, one of my favourite quotes from her from many years ago, and it struck a chord and it kind of aligns with what we're talking about, is luck is opportunity plus preparation. So the idea is you can't just kind of have luck as in get what you're trying to manifest by looking for opportunity or believing it will happen. You have to actually do the preparation so that when that opportunity comes along, you're ready for it. So if you're not doing the work ahead of time and an opportunity comes along, you won't be ready and you won't have the, in quotation marks, luck that you think you deserve or you think that other people get.
Yeah, I like the idea that the path does rise up to meet us, but we have to be putting our own feet on the path in the first place. And then there's that lovely sweet spot between what you want and what your skills and talents are and what the world needs from you. And sometimes it's a little different to what you might have imagined it. So having that space in your mind to allow something to manifest a little bit differently, I remember someone saying, I'm not looking for a relationship at the moment. It's like, well, I'm walking down the path. I'm not particularly looking for diamonds, but if I trip across them, I'm not going to go, wasn't looking for diamonds today. I'll just leave them there. Grabbing the opportunities that come along that have allowed resonance, allowed yes, even if they are a little bit different. I think sometimes those audacious dreams we have, those big affirmations, are simply a way of getting ourselves motivated to get off the couch and start to move in a direction, and then maybe life will offer us something interesting along the way. Very philosophical start to our podcast today, Kim.
It is, isn't it? We're really getting it. And it's possibly because I've also just recently started reading Atomic Habits, which has been out for a long time and has been a huge success. James Clear, I think, is the author. And so I was a bit behind on the game. I think because I had stopped reading so many of those books because I had got to the point of realising I actually was looking elsewhere for the answer to what I was trying to get, and I just needed to kind of get out and do it. But the idea of habits and creating those habits is a strong part of your book as well. And I'm wondering how that's going now, Sheridan. 6 months or so since the release? Have those habits, and you were very clear and very specific about the things you wanted to change, have those habits been sustainable for you? And what has been some of the, I guess, things you've needed to do to make sure they're sustainable?
Probably where I need to start is people keep saying, I was going to ask you for a coffee, but you don't do that. No, that's not correct. For 90 days, I suspended some habits. So the plan wasn't necessarily to make those exact habits stick, but to suspend their behaviour for long enough to learn what was beneath them, what drives them, and then to have more choice about what I pick up again. So I still go out for coffee. I still need to press pause at times and go, am I ready for another 90-day challenge? Because there is no way in the planet, even 90 days, are going to change a lifetime of habits if those habits are not something that I'm putting in the forefront of my mind and putting on the table as something I want every day. So since writing the book, and certainly releasing it was interesting because I thought, am I walking my talk? We write a book that there's a little bit of, there wasn't a big lag time in this one with some publishers and some publishing houses. Things can come out a long time after you've written them. This one was fairly quick. We were up against it at the time. there were, all sorts of changes going on in the world, in the publishing house, in my life, and the timeline was critical. The way this particular publisher worked, we had to stick to the timeline regardless. So that made for an interesting journey. It stopped me from getting caught in perfectionism. So that was one of the great things about writing this book, is that I got the deal very early on. I'd really only written a couple of pages when someone suggested I pitch it early, because I said, this just feels like now. And I don't know if you've had this happen, Kim, but you get an idea and then you sit on it waiting to make the perfect book or the perfect podcast or the perfect business or whatever it is you want in your life. And then you hear of someone on the other side of the world that's written a book about waking up and, I can't possibly do it now, no one will want it. Or someone more famous comes along and it's like, no one's going to read mine, they're going to all read theirs. It was really funny when this one did come out. The first person that sat next to on the shelf was Michelle Obama. I mean, if you're worried about being next to someone famous and your book failing, there it is right there. The second week,
no pressure.
Prince Harry. Yeah, no pressure. But, I thought, well, I'm in good company. What I liked about what the publishers did with this is the cover actually says what it's about. I have enough, I do enough, I am enough. So coming back to your question, that 90-day challenge was about suspending or pausing some habits so that I could investigate and really understand what I was doing and what it would feel like to consider if I had enough already. And what I discovered was that I did. And it doesn't mean that I wanted for the rest of my life to never buy a coffee out or never eat out in a restaurant. But I notice now when those habits are getting a little bit out of balance. When I want to buy something, because three things for those who haven't read the book, the three things I undertook, and of course a reader can, undertake anything or nothing and just read this book and they don't worry about the challenge side of it. I think a lot of people have said they've sort of binge read it and then gone back and decided whether or not to do a challenge, which is lovely. But the three things I chose to do for 90 days while I was contemplating I have enough, I do enough, I am enough, were to no cafes and restaurants for 90 days. Because I'm of that generation where that's where we meet. That's what people do. That's mostly how we get together. And I had noticed that, my weight was sneaking back on, and I have a lifetime of, body image issues. So that was always hovering in the background. I was one of those people, didn't matter how slender I got, it was never enough. Having put a bit of weight back on, quite a bit, I look back and go, next time I'm there, I'm going to pause and go, this will do. Maybe I'm okay as I am today. So no cafes and restaurants for 90 days, no non-essential spending, and to go home from work on time. So no unpaid overtime. I only succeeded in 2 hours. So I am something of a workaholic, and I did not succeed in that third one. And when I look back on that, Kim, I realise, and this is where sort of the grace or self-compassion comes in, it's actually where I had the most to learn at the time. I think, in my overall life, understanding what is enough in terms of food and spending and doing, and probably for many people, these are some of the big issues. But certainly at the time, I was really struggling to just put the brakes on and say, hey, I've done enough work today. And I work in a culture which is wonderful and passionate in broadcasting. We were in the pandemic, so the news cycle was very, very fast. Things were changing constantly. Before that, we had Black Summer, which, of course, here in this part of the world started in winter. So those bushfires that, people watched all around the world, and now we're seeing echoed in Maui, where I'm about to head. For people in my industry, overworking was just, of course you weren't going to say no. So looking back, that's where I had the most to learn, that, that I am, it's not that I'm not important, but I'm not the only person that can do something, and to trust in the greater organisation and the world in general, as well as my own life, to trust that that's enough. I can put down the pen, I can put down the microphone, I can put down the cleaning cloth or whatever it happens to be, and say that'll do today. Press forward. That was a tough one to learn. I've been very, very much a slow learner.
And I'm just thinking, if we do have this underlying, doubt, am I enough? It is through those other things like the work and the social status or the other things that we do that we become enough in our sense of who we are. So working on that sense of enough allows us to let go maybe a little bit of some of those other things that we use to bolster our enoughness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So while I was trying to not overwork, I was contemplating, where does this come from? Where is the messaging? It's in society, but also in my family, coming from not so much a blue collar background, but that work ethic of, you are your work was an underlying thing, that you have to go above and beyond. You want to succeed. And look, to some degree, these messages, myself, my brother, my sister, are all what the general public would say successful people. Having that drive is important, but going into overdrive when you actually can't stop and feeling like if you're not doing or you're not seen to be doing, that you're not enough or you're not good enough, that it sort of slips into our identity. And I think that's really dangerous. Whether you lose a job and your identity has been around that job, maybe through no fault of your own, you lost that job, you're still going to feel bad. Or when you get to a point in your life where, life requires you to retire. I don't know if we're ever going to retire these days. Certainly not those of us that are entrepreneurial and creative. It doesn't feel like we're going to. But when that is, forced upon us by circumstances out of our control, or when one part of us starts to say, hey, whether it's a health condition or one of our loved ones needs our attention, or we just need some space, we can't give it to ourselves, then we are putting ourselves in place. I think it's important to enjoy what drives us, but recognise that we still need to be in the driver's seat, and we need to sometimes say to that very driven part, I'm going to take a back seat. There's a reason why people create weekends. There's a reason why people have holidays. There's a reason why people retire. Life is not meant to be the same all the time. And that's why I chose 90 days as my challenge, because it's a season, and the next season's not meant to be the same as the last season.
Oh, I love this conversation. There's so many parts I could go here, but that idea that I think there's a lot of that, probably coming back to the very original thing we spoke about, is that more is not necessarily more, and that more drive and more passion for your work, we need some of that in order to be good at what we do. And even going back to when you said before that you were under such a tight deadline with your book, there was no time for perfectionism. And I'm sure in your business and writing, there is an element of perfectionism that you require in order to produce good work. But more of that is not a good thing. So sometimes we need to be constrained in our own attempt to be more of whoever we are.
And also in publishing, I had to trust. That's what copy editors are for, typesetters, that there is more than my eyes on this book. And due to those restrictions, it has gone through with a couple of flaws. But the core of the writing became very instinctive, because even though I had to put a plan together in order to present a book deal idea, a pitch, nonetheless, there was a lot of following my instincts and ploughing ahead, because there wasn't the time to get caught up in perfecting one particular paragraph. And I was very flattered that they didn't, say, being the publishing house and the editors, didn't change the writing at all. They had some suggestions around structure, the actual writing they left alone, and that was very
How do you balance the creativity side of writing or radio producing and being on radio with what I imagine is you require a structure and a format and a plan with writing or with presenting a radio show, but you also want that creativity. How do you balance those two aspects of yourself in your career?
That's a great question, because certainly being on air in the type of programs I've been doing since coming to the national broadcaster, it's very deadline driven, and you're looking at the clock constantly, and at the same time needing to leave space in your mind, even in the preparation, for listening to something unexpected, the real gems that the person you're interviewing has to offer. If it's so structured and there's not even 30 seconds of spare time, you can actually miss the gold and end up with quite a dry interview. And even though getting all, say, that information or the newsy stuff across is very important, if it lacks heart and soul and perhaps even at times a sense of humour, then is it engaging for somebody listening? Somebody listening, you want them to feel like they're part of the conversation, that they're a fly on the wall, if not an active part, which of course is what we have to talk about. So we are very deadline driven, and I find that really helpful, because my personal style would be to float along, having dreams and contemplating my navel till I'm blue in the face. My resentment any time I have to work an early start is because I have this quite a drawn out process, like somewhere between waking up at say 5:36 a.m. and being ready to engage with the world around 10 or 11. I'm very happy walking in nature, having a swim, writing in my journal and allowing ideas to flow, and then comes the structured time of the day. So that's how it works for me naturally. But then a lot of my career I've been on early start, which is wake up, switch on straight away. And that, for my natural body clock, really stressful. Even though I like the show, the rest of the day, having not started in that gentle way, I find it quite hard to unwind and feel a little bit discombobulated. So I think we're all a little bit different when it comes to how a day works for us. But I would say that when we're in a very deadline-driven or a very high-demand role, it's even more important to give yourself some unstructured time. So I notice, for example, that I go for a walk in nature, but I'll be listening to a podcast, Tomcat or the audio book, all of these things. My brain was just getting so much that I was missing that peaceful time, that nothing time, which is where true creativity comes from. So now, if I am doing an early show, I drive to work in silence. As tempting as it is to listen to X, Y, and Z, or have a conversation with a friend on the other side of the world because I can, because they're awake and nobody else is, I'm very good at filling the air. Dead air in radio is not something we want. However, it's become important to me to allow space, and that's where that original, the new ideas pop in, and then I can just dictate on my phone or something. This idea, what do I do about this? And then back into observe the nature, just let myself feel.
That's, I think, one of my biggest suggestions, recommendations and rules for myself is around space. I really do think so many people fill every space up in their life now, and even with children, children have school and then they do their music and then they do their sports and then it's sort of like we've got this belief that we kind of have to fill every space up in order to, I don't know, to succeed or to be worthy, or I'm not sure where that drive's coming from, but I think you're exactly right, is that we all need space to create, even if you're not necessarily a creative or consider yourself a creative, is creating space where there's, I like the radio analogy, dead air. Dead air on radio, bad, but I think more of us need more dead air in our life.
And it would be hard to become creative, whatever form that creativity takes in your life. We're all creative, if not creatives, as in working in creative industries. We need that space. And yet I think life has offered us so much, especially with the rise of technology. It is far easier to listen to an audio book than to read an actual book. There is something about the space of reading something yourself and pausing when you want to digest it, or even rereading a paragraph or a chapter because you want to sink into it. There is something about sitting down with pen and paper or doodle or draw or play a board game that is takes a little more effort in some ways than being spoon-fed. So watching Netflix or whatever streaming service you're watching. And I think that has come as a sort of bizarre offering from the overdoing. We're overdoing all the time and it becomes hard for us to switch off. So, and I myself am guilty of this, so I take time where I press pause on streaming services and just don't have any free ones. In fact, ABC, iView, SBS, there's all sorts of things available. But to press pause on anything that's becoming a little bit addictive because it doesn't allow that space. As soon as I get home, if I'm exhausted, it's really easy to just, put on an episode and just let it stream away. And I've discovered what I was losing in leaning into that. So with the 90-day challenge, a lot of people I've spoken to have tried their own. For many of them, it's about suspending streaming services, suspending online memberships, just having a break from things. Doesn't mean you won't go back to them, but you might not go back to it in the same way. So right back to your very first question, what has stuck? What's really stuck to me is that I'm not doing things in the same way. I'm more conscious of them. Now, I can use that also to guilt myself, but if I'm feeling guilty or uncomfortable about the way I'm behaving, I let that be a little red flag, and then I can use that journaling time, that conversation time, that walk in nature. I think, well, what do I really want? Do I really want yet another, whatever it is, job, yet another task, yet another purchase, yet another meal out, or perhaps I need something else. Perhaps I need to go for a swim in the ocean. Perhaps to be free. Perhaps I need to connect with someone and give them time. It's allowed me to, in an ongoing way, contemplate in a highly productive but gentle self-compassionate way how I actually spend my time, which is my life. My life is time. How much of it do I want to be in front of the screen watching someone else's creativity? Yes, that is joyous. Yes, a little bit of it is great. It's rewarding. It's great. There's nothing wrong with it. But, we can speak to a lot of people spending their weekends to teach stuff. And if that's an ongoing habit, maybe you want to have a look at what else is missing.
Yeah, and I think what we're looking for here is creating space so that you understand yourself and then can make choice. And that's really what freedom of self-freedom is, isn't it? Doesn't mean you get everything you want. It means you have the choice. And if you can start to choose around how you interact with the world, if you choose to sit in front of Netflix for a few hours and eat chocolate ice cream, and you've chosen that, and it's not a unconscious, running away from your problems type of thing, fabulous, do it. If it makes you feel good and you need a distraction, you can choose that. And other times you make the choice not to do that because it's not helping you get closer to your goals. If your goals, for example, are being more healthy, or if your goals are for doing your own creative work, sitting in front of Netflix is not helping you get to your goals. So it's really helping with choices. So I'm wondering, Sheridan, what choices are you making coming up? What's happening next in the world of Sheridan?
Well, the very next thing, in 11 days' time, I'm on a flight going overseas for the first time in many years. So my mother passed away nearly 10 years ago, and I wanted in that first year of her passing to revisit Hawaii, where I spent my formative years. And I talked with my siblings about this adventure. Now, Mum dedicated her body to medical science, so we decided to wait till that was complete. And somewhere within, I think, where we were at the time, and it does change from state to state in the country, where Mum lived in Sydney, that was a 4 to 7 year wait, and we got the ashes back in the middle of the day, so that's not a time to go travelling. And then it's aligning our lives. It's turned out that the trip is myself and my sister, and we're heading over there with some of Mum's ashes to scatter them, because that was a time in our childhood that I remember Mum being really content. And yeah, this book was a 90-day challenge to find contentment. There's quite a few of Mum's quotes in there, like, "You can't ride 2 horses with 1 bum," which was her way of saying, you can't do 2 things at once. You certainly, as Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, said, you might be able to do 2, but you try and do 3, something like that. So that reminder of, this is enough. And yeah, so to honour her, we're doing that. And look, it's such an interesting thing, because there's a part of me that's going, I'm going to be in the US, and the book came out there later, and maybe I could cut through and do some PR, and maybe I will, but it's okay if it's just a holiday. It's okay if I'll certainly put my hand up and reach out a little bit and do what I can, but I don't need the whole trip to be about blogging my book or blogging my message. There's a lot of space in this trip. The first day, 10 days with my sister, then I'm catching up with friends, catching up with my childhood best friend from Hawaii, but I'm meeting her in Seattle, where another friend is, and that friend was going to come to Hawaii and then had all these work things come up, and she said, "Well, I've got these points, would you be willing to come to Seattle?" And then suddenly all these magical sort of things are lining up for this week in Seattle that I hadn't planned for, that we really only locked down last week. Then I go back to Hawaii, and I've got time on my own, and I keep getting a little bit anxious about that. To be wasting money, and Sheridan, which is free, just let that be. See what happens. Come back.
Word magical.
Yes.
Yes. By creating that space and going off and going, actually, I'll just go and see how this all works out, and you end up in Seattle, and a magical opportunity aligned itself without too much effort or cost, it sounds, on your behalf, by being open to the fact, well, let's see what happens. Beautiful.
The most challenging thing is I have to pack 2 very different wardrobes, because Hawaii's warm and Seattle is heading into winter, and that's a cold, grey place. But there's a lot of beauty there. Rather than I think it's going to be interesting, and holding a mixture of, well, there's some intentions, but also letting go of any expectations, and it's okay if I have to fight just to be yourself and think about Mum and life, and those who've gone before us, like my friend Mel, whose lessons are woven through the book. Mel was an extraordinary person. Someone described her as Pollyanna on steroids or Pollyanna on crack. She had an incredible ability, even in the face of dreadful adversity. And we're not all like that, but we all take it for something else. And brings the conversation full circle to the expectations that sometimes some of that person's industry, all around bigger, better, faster, more. Necessarily, Mel taught me that sometimes just appreciate the life out the window. She's still anything else was still life out the window. She's still
Yeah. And that we don't have to become a Pollyanna to appreciate those things, but we can learn those lessons and admire the stories of her, and her approach to her illness were really inspiring. But we don't have to be like that, but we can take lessons from that and create our own version. I'm not a Pollyanna type of person, but I can certainly take on those lessons of remembering to just pause and be grateful for those really small things. We don't have to be leaping around with joy all the time to be a positive person, that we take on those lessons and become a better or a more joyous version of ourselves in whatever way that is. So yeah, it is lovely to have those inspirations and then have those choices, learn to make those choices that bring us what we want in our life. So where can people find your book? I imagine in bookstores and online.
Yes, I'm curious around bookstores because I think a place where you're known, the books will hang around, or where they're doing well. Other places it will be like, who is this person? Never heard of them. The books come and go. Online is easy. It's everywhere. The distributors, the publishing houses, are fantastic with that. And bookstores, if they don't have it, they will get it.
Wonderful.
It's an easy one to find. It's also on Audible, so that's your preferred, digesting way. If you're on a budget, it's in libraries. Certainly here on the Sunshine Coast, Queensland, Australia, it's in libraries. Maybe you can request a library on the other side of the world, get it in, and then suddenly,
who knows?
Others too. Libraries are terrific like that, and it's also available as an ebook, fairly way to consume a book. I like having the physical book because the cover.
Me too.
It's an affirmation in itself. It's that reminder. I'll leave you with a final story, Kim, if you've got a second. I met a chap up at Woodfordia at Woodford, where it's a very famous folk festival every year, and people come from all over. And he is part of the build at Woodford. I said, I saw you at the airport. I was walking along and I saw it and I looked at the cover. I have enough to do enough. I am enough. I thought to myself, I am. And I put my shoulders back and I went forward into my day. And I'm like, so you didn't need to buy the book, a couple of words on its own. That would have been great if you bought the book. But the thing is, just reading that and letting that message sink in for a moment made him feel really good. So, and I know a couple of people who, through their life circumstances, have the book and haven't had the bandwidth to read it for whatever reason, work or, being a carer. But they can look over and, you've got a poster that's not telling you to climb another goddamn mountain and stand at the, the pinnacle of life and shine brightly. It's just reminding you, that you actually are. You really are.
Indeed. So thanks, Sheridan, for joining us. And I will put your details in the show notes for people who are watching on YouTube or on listening on your preferred applications, Spotify, etc. I'll put the information there. And if you are enjoying these interviews, make sure you subscribe and follow. So thank you, Sheridan, and I hope you have a wonderful, exciting, magical trip to Hawaii and Seattle. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to your audience as well and to spend a bit of time with you.
Wonderful. Thank you.